Hi and welcome to this second section of the mental preparation part of the course really, and we're going to talk about the fear of failure here. And I know this is a sales course, a telesales course, but I just wanted to take a moment really to say that the fear of failure for all of us is, well, for most of us, is really ingrained within our psyche, and it stops us doing so many things that we would perhaps like to do and are too afraid to do. And I have very personal experience in this. I have been subject to fears in my life that have held me back and stopped me doing things that I should have done. So rather than regret it, I'm now redressing the balance, even at my tender age. And I would really urge you to do the same thing. And of course, as I say, we are talking about, in this particular course, we're talking about the fear of making a telephone call to another human being. And I'm not belittling it because these fears are very real. But I wanted to try and explain to you, because I've learned and taught myself and looked into this extensively, and I would advise you to do the same as well. Do your own research. But the more you realise and look into fear and the way our minds work, the more you'll understand what's going on for you personally, because obviously we're all slightly different, and it will help you overcome these fears once and for all. So my sort of 2 pence worth, I suppose, on this is as follows. And I'd like to start with a quote from a gentleman called G.K. Chesterton. He was alive around about the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and he was an author, a poet, and he was known for quirky sayings, really. And he said this: if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly until you can do it well. And I really like that because it says it all. You can't learn to swim from a classroom. You can't learn to fly a plane from a book, and so on. So you've got to engage in the activity, even though it's scary. It's the only way to learn. I personally am developing my public speaking ability, and I've always been afraid of doing that. And I am actually getting a little bit better with each one that I do. I also liked what Sven-Göran Eriksson had to say about failure. The greatest barrier to success is the fear of failure, and that's the emphasis. It's the fear of failure, not the failure itself. So let's go into it in a little bit more detail. It's not the failing itself. We have all failed spectacularly. Anybody that you admire in the public eye, be them chefs, celebrities, sports people, athletes, actors, they have all failed miserably at some time or another. Ask any stand-up comedian how many times has he been booed off, or she's been booed off the stage, and they'll tell you loads of times. But they keep getting back up, dusting themselves down and getting back on. And these are people that are really now successful. Eddie Izzard said that it took me 15 years to experience an overnight success. And I think that sort of says it all. As I say, everyone you've admired has failed spectacularly, whoever they are. When you do something wrong, one tip that I've adopted, which helps me, is separate the fact from the big picture. So if your big picture is, if you spill a drink and you say, oh, goodness me, that's so typical of me, I'm so clumsy, I'm so sorry about that, oh dear. That's what a lot of us do, and you are giving yourself a domino effect. You're taking one isolated incident and you're making it a trait of yours when it's no such thing. And a lot of us seem to be very quick to be willing to do that, really, and it's a really bad habit, and it's one I would encourage you to look at and try and address. In sales, the great thing about sales is it's nice and tangible. You can see where you're getting, how much progress you're making. But I would urge you to make some of your goals learning goals, so that expect to fail, expect to be shut down and boxed up and sent on your way by the person who answers the phone. Expect to stutter and stammer and go red in the face and lose the whole plot maybe, and end up, having to put the phone down. Expect all those things and make a note as if you're somebody else observing yourself. So detach yourself from the emotion that activity might otherwise creep up on you. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Don't own the failure. It's natural. It's going to happen. Just observe it and say, "Oh, that's interesting. I do seem to stumble at that particular part of the call. I'm going to set a goal to see if I can just slightly improve. Just make a slight improvement here and a slight improvement there, rather than sort of allow it to defeat you and demoralise you, and stop you in your tracks. Fear will be with you. Fear is with us all the time. When I stand up to do public speaking I am still very nervous. I've always practiced what I'm going to say, rehearse it again and again and again, usually in front of my teddies, and until I've got it word perfect. But I'm still very nervous when I come to do it. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying, Martin Shaw being interviewed on the radio. It was a couple of years ago, and he was appearing in a play, on a stage play in the West End, I think it must have been. And the person said to him, "Are you, how's the play going? How's it going?" And he said, "Oh, it's going really well." And they asked him about nerves, stage fright and a bit nervous. And he said, "Sometimes I actually physically vomit before I go on stage. But even if I don't physically throw up, I feel nauseous. I feel like I'm going to be sick. My heart's in my throat, and etc., etc." And this is Martin Shaw, one of our finest actors, years of experience. You wouldn't think, would you, for a second, that he had a nervous bone in his body. He's so well accomplished as an actor. But that's what he said. So if he's allowed to feel that nervous, then we're allowed, I'm sure, to feel a little bit fearful. But it's the courage to do it and not be afraid to fail. That's the thing. Anyway, and what's the worst that can happen? That's often said as a joke, isn't it? "Oh, come on, let's do this. What's the worst that can happen?" Well, what is the worst that could happen? Nobody died from making a telephone call. This person at the other end of the phone, the worst they can do is, I don't know, slam the phone down on you, or be rude to you. That's only going to affect you. Eleanor Roosevelt said, people will only hurt your feelings if you give them your permission to do so. So, in other words, let it bounce off you. And easier said than done, but it's something that's worth practicing at least. So, hopefully, this is just it's such a massive subject that you might want to engage in a little more, do a little bit more of your own research, and find out a little bit more about yourself maybe, and think, what are your coping strategies when it comes to a fearful situation. I particularly like what this gentleman had to say. If you're not familiar with him, he's Napoleon Hill. He was an author, a successful business person. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich, and this is what he has to say on the subject: success or failure is decided by the point at which we give up. I saw Tess Daly being interviewed, and she said, people think that we have some kind of superhuman gene within us as athletes that means we can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on a freezing winter's morning, when of course it's still pitch black, and go and run for 10 miles in the hills or through the streets. And we haven't. We've just got a grit and a determination to succeed. And, it's that kind of spirit that you need, and sometimes it eludes us all. But you can be incredibly successful at this, making your own sales calls, or anything you turn your mind to. And I'm not trying to be doing sort of an Anthony Robbins on you. I wouldn't dream of trying to emulate that. A very clever man. But you get the idea. This is about you and, chasing and facing your fears. And it's true that until you master your fear, or at least bring it under control, then it is going to rule you. And you don't want that. you want to be able to be the master of your own ship. So I'm sorry, this has maybe sounded and come over as a bit of a lecture, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to say that it's okay to feel afraid of making telephone calls, and don't expect that just because you do a course like this, or any course, or you read a book, or you do anything, that's going to make it all go away and you're going to be okay with it. You know, it's the feel the fear and do it anyway kind of principle that we're trying for here. So anyway, I hope that's helped. Enough of this. In the next section we're going to look at setting your stall out, your environment really, an equipment check, in other words, to make sure that you are working in the right environment to make your sales calls. So there we are, we'll see you on the next section. Thanks very much for paying attention to this one. Thank you.